It's not just talking about traditional delivery of medical services. It's the other things we've talked about, like health information technology or wellness and prevention. Those are all sort of aspects of what you think of more as a value chain in a cluster. And then working together, you can tackle common issues. For instance, there are a lot of smaller employers, and sometimes they can't deal with something like a healthcare pipeline. But if you do it as an industry group, then you could, the system partners can be more responsive. So they collaborate within themselves, and then they work across the clusters and with their public partners. And this is the work that the partnership is trying to support with you. So the cluster strategy also is trying to focus on areas where there's innovation, where it can help drive innovation across the business side, and then provide the skills that are needed to grow the cluster and provide the pathways for people to have better jobs and longer term resources. And then it also looks at what's called the trade flows. What does it cost? What's the value of the industry? What is the output that it provides to the economy? Where do the inputs come to supply that? And what you'll find is that there is a lot of what we call leakage. We don't supply everything for our industries from within the valley, and part of that is natural. You import what you need. But we also export our people. They go outside the valley to get medical services outside the valley. And that will always happen, but are there things that we can do to keep more of that here by expanding our services that we provide? And so that's a lot of the mission that you all are working on. Then we want to look at things like the cross-cluster linkages. You heard Steve talk about the construction that's going on across the valley. Well, that construction is a really terribly impacted cluster. And a lot of that construction was focused on residential and commercial. So there's an effort now underway by the workforce boards to look at public sector infrastructure as a driver. So hospitals are part of that. So if you look at hospitals also as a driver in other areas, or clinics and other kind of medical facilities, they're also important to the valley in other ways. And as you heard, all of you are trying to respond to the needs of the employers because they're the people who hire employees. Well, the public sector is important in that too, but you want to be responsive to where the needs are for the workforce. And a big part of this is aligning already the organizational capacity and the resources we have to be more effective in supporting the cluster. And that's what having the shared understanding helps us be, I think, more efficient about that. And the key to this, and this is really the mission of the Mike Dozier's office, is to really collaborate with you. There's a lot going on. This is not to duplicate or replace. It's to work with you and support you. So it's really a partnership based, and that's why we're so happy so many partners are here. So the first thing we did was we looked at the set of clusters that are already existing across the counties. And every county has a set of industries that are a target, but few of them really support sort of more robust cluster activities. That usually means a more engaged way of working with employers. I think Kern County has a more active role in that, and Fresno County does. But it's hard. It's hard work to keep clusters going. It's a lot of organizational process. So the key finding, though, was that the 5 original areas that the partnership identified, they still continue to be the most commonly shared clusters, but they have changed and evolved. And there's this concept of the value chain, is sort of building on capturing opportunities that are being lost outside the valley. But especially with the budget cuts that have been happening, and you've heard across the board, they really affect the capacity to support the clusters. A lot of times cluster initiatives have a private sector champion, but they're supported by the public sector partners. And so it's really hard with the budget challenges. So we also want to see about how we can efficiently support the clusters. So these are the 2012 regional clusters of focus that we're going to be looking at in the action plan that we're developing for the partnership. So it's the ag value chain, and it includes now a much broader notion of the value chain to include health and wellness. It's things like regional food systems, it's access to healthy foods, it's connecting our producers here with our consumers, improving health outcomes. So it's not just considered an export kind of thing. We're also trying to look at opportunities in research and development. There's a lot going on with universities and other kind of activities to increase sustainability in the sector, which will also improve health outcomes for our communities. Diversified manufacturing is kind of a catch-all for what the rest of manufacturing is, because there's manufacturing in almost every one of these clusters. And we'll talk about that for health. Energy is a big cluster here, but it's renewable, but also the other kinds of sector bases that we've had. Health and wellness, so wellness is now an added concept to the definition for the health cluster. And logistics and transportation, one of the important new ones, it's small, it's lost some ground because it's manufacturing, but it's innovation-based, is water technology. So that not only supports our industries, but again, it improves health outcomes around water quality and supply, which is a big issue for a lot of our rural communities. And then the public sector infrastructure strategy, which I just mentioned. If you have any questions, please stop me, because I'm going to go like a fire hose and just put it out there to get through this. But basically, we looked at the economy from 2001 to 2010. So we got a couple of cycles of recession, recovery, Great Recession. And so the encouraging thing is, even with the challenges, there are about over 1 million private sector jobs in the Valley. So there are more jobs in the Valley. This is just the private sector side. But in the last 10 years, there were over 32,000 net new jobs that were created for a 4.4% job growth. So most of that was actually in the health sector. Part of that is because it's population driven, but there is growth and there is a reason for opportunity as we go forward. And then just in the last year across the Valley, there were 9,100 new jobs, and the government lost 5,300 jobs. So you can see the impact of that in that sector.
For the 1 million jobs in the private sector, does that include either the nonprofit or, say, the nonprofit healthcare providers, hospitals?
I think so. If it's a tricky definition, because the public health ones that are in government are not, I don't think they're included in this definition. I know, going back and forth, I have to say, the data is always a challenge, and so it will understate the people that are actually involved in the health sector. But it does include the nonprofits, it just doesn't include the public health side. And that, in the data, the public health side is not very well defined either. So this is just, this is what we call a bubble chart. This is a graphic way to represent the economy. So in the center of the chart is a 0%. And so what falls to the right are industries that are growing, and what falls to the left is decline. The size of the bubble is the size of the employment. So the larger the bubble, the more employment there is. On the right-hand side of the chart, the further out you are, that's the fastest growing sector. And then as you go to the top, that means that it's more concentrated in the Valley compared to the state. So for instance, agriculture is the biggest cluster. Well, it's not the biggest cluster in this way, it's a sector grouping, because trade, transportation, and utilities are grouped. But agriculture as a standalone cluster, sector, is the biggest sector in the Valley. That's 183,000 jobs, and it's 6 times more concentrated in the Valley than statewide. The fastest growing sector is the education and health services. The most impacted from a negative standpoint has been construction and manufacturing, no surprise, but there have been growth in some parts of those areas. So this is the traditional way of looking at the industry sectors before you put them into clusters. I will note that there has been growth also in professional and business services, and I think that's very encouraging, because it means we're building a more diversified and sophisticated economy. So this is just a snapshot of 2010, where the economy is, and so you can see where healthcare is. It's a big cluster, and it's a growing cluster. So it's a really important cluster to the Valley. The thing that we want to stress on the bottom is what we call the economic or the cluster foundations. Those are the things that all the clusters need to thrive. They need good infrastructure, including broadband. They need a good education and workforce training system. They need a healthy environment and quality of life. They need a good regulatory environment. They need good access to financing for entrepreneurship and other activities. So all clusters need that, but clusters need different pieces of it, and that's the value of having a more focused strategy. So the health and wellness cluster is broken into 5 components as kind of a value chain. So there's the home health care delivery, which is the practitioners, the hospitals, the clinics, etc. There's the medical device manufacturing, which is small, but it has the opportunity for growth. Pharmaceutical manufacturing is really small, but it is fast growing. And so that's a potential, but we've been told by a lot of the EDCs that one of the challenges that these companies have in locating here is they can't find a skilled workforce. The supplies and services are the companies that support the providers and the consumers. And so those are the wholesale trades and other kind of services. And then wellness and fitness is more on the retail side. And this is an underdefined cluster because some of what we would call fitness, like recreations and counseling and gyms and things like that, they're under a broader category of recreation. So they don't, so this is an area we can work on in the future, because when you hear all the talk about wellness and prevention, we think a lot more of this can be captured under this area. So I just want to also mention that we have, as one of the handouts, a definition of what the cluster looks like. There's something that the federal government uses called the NAICS, North American Industrial Classification System, and this is how people sort and define. They group all these NAICS under categories of clusters. So it doesn't have a little header, but it looks like this. It's a one-page sheet. So this is how we actually go into the data and find out by each of these NAICS what's in there. Now I will tell you that, again, there's a bit of an art as well as a science to clusters, and you can regroup this information. There have been other cluster strategies in the Valley that have grouped things in a little different way. And so as you go forward, you can take this data, the worksheets will be accessible to everybody, and you can continue to work on that. So now when we regroup the health into the cluster, what we see is that over time, well, as of now, there's 128,000 jobs in 2010, which was almost 13% of all the jobs in the Valley. Overall cluster growth was 21.5%, so it was slightly faster than the rate in California. But the cluster growth was almost 70% of the regional job growth. So that's almost 23,000 jobs of all the total that happened over the 10 years were in the health cluster. In the cluster, and you'll be able to see from the size of the bubble chart, almost all of that is concentrated right now in the healthcare delivery. And this sector is a little bit more concentrated in the Valley, I think a lot because of all the efforts people have been making on that. But we're lagging in other areas, which means we don't have enough of the other kind of businesses in the Valley to support the population and the businesses. The medical device manufacturing lost ground, but that's consistent with manufacturing across the state and the country globally. So that is beginning to come back. So here's the overall component chart, and so you can see how big the healthcare delivery is. It's concentrated around it's just slightly above the state level because the one is up there. Health and wellness is up there. They've both grown over the last 10 years. The bubble out to the right is the health supplies and services. It's a smaller cluster. And when we get further on, you'll see it's really concentrated in one county, which is the value of kind of disaggregating the data. And then the medical device manufacturing lost, and pharmaceuticals not up here at so little, but we have a little chart for it. So then what we did was we looked at the employment by county. And so when you look at county level here, every county had growth. Kings County is the furthest out, and that was because Adventist built some facilities. So it's a small county, it's a fast growth, and when we go down and we talk to people at the county level, we begin to find out the dynamics of what's behind the data. So sometimes there's been one major facility that's open that bumps it out, and because it's a small population county, it had a big impact. But you can see that this is a growing cluster. Kern County has over 23,000 jobs in this part of the component. It had a growth rate over 20%, so it's an important cluster in the county. Okay, this is the manufacturing. So Kern County has 382, or it had almost 400 jobs, but it did have a loss. And Merced and Stanislaus County were growing. So there's variation again across the counties when you get into the looking below, and that's because there's some regional specialization. So I think the idea to be thinking about for the South Valley too is where are our specializations and where do we fit within the overall valley. So in the pharmaceutical side, Kern County doesn't really even show up. There's minimal employment here. Now that's not to say things haven't happened in the last year and a half. There is a data lag. I don't know, maybe Cheryl, for instance, could tell us a little bit more about that. But this is the services and supply side. So now you can see there hasn't really been much growth in this cluster. What pulled it out was there was a lot of growth in San Joaquin Valley. I would think it's because it's kind of a goods movement corridor in the north part of the valley, and it's connected to the Bay Area and the Sacramento economies. The wellness and the fitness, there's a lot of concentration here or attention to the issue. Kern County actually is one of the stronger growing counties in this sector, but there's less than 2,000 jobs, and I think that there are more jobs here. So this would be, I'd say the work is to really understand the cluster better, but it looks good that there's attention and focus in the county. So the other thing that we looked at was the trade flows. What's the value of this cluster value chain? And it's basically more than $18 billion in the whole valley. And of the output of that, almost all of it is consumed locally. So some of it, for instance, is exported if you manufacture or you export goods and services. But it makes sense that most of it is consumed locally because healthcare is a local serving, it's a population serving cluster primarily. But there is some sales outside the valley. So the question is it really manufacturing, or are there some specialized services and capacities that people have here that are exporting their talent and knowledge? And this is just a graphical representation of the output and where it goes, the trade flows. Now we've done this analysis for other clusters, and that information will be available. And when you look at the trade flow data, you'll see actually really big gaps in some of the other clusters. We have a lot of output, but we're buying a lot from the outside to produce that output, so that's what's called a leakage gap. So to produce this output, the cluster needs almost $7 billion in inputs, and it gets about $4 billion of that from local providers. So that could be maybe it's a manufacturer of special things like gloves or any kind of medical equipment. But the remaining almost $3 billion, including medical equipment and supplies, is purchased from outside the region. So our question is, and this is something to work on, is there an opportunity there to substitute, and it's entrepreneurship, expansion of existing businesses, and this is the value of a cluster because you might not see it at a smaller level, but when you look at the demand across the valley, it could be an opportunity. I was speaking to someone who works for Adventist Health who's also on the partnership board, and he said, they send a lot of their specialized lab services outside the valley. But he said if many of the hospitals could coordinate on that, you could create a specialized lab in the valley, which would create really good jobs. So those are the kind of opportunities that we're looking to fill. We have a chart that shows what some of those sector areas are, and that's something we want to work with the EDCs in particular on, and the county economic development, is to see, are they realistic potential for import, for substitution? Because they may be, some of them may be so specialized they'll just stay out of the valley. But on the other hand, that's within the industry, what the industry needs. But the demand for healthcare services by consumers, households, governments, businesses, is estimated at $22.5 billion, and approximately 28% of that is provided. People go outside the valley for that. So we, obviously, probably in Kern County, people go to Los Angeles for specialized medical care or other, second opinions and things like that. So this is the input into the cluster. It's just another way to show that. So we do get a lot from outside. It's an economic development opportunity. You have a chart that shows where we think some of the opportunities are to provide some of these services as a business opportunity, and they're across the clusters. And this is the demand. Again, it shouldn't really be imports. It's what people are going outside for goods and services. But this is the demand for health services and supplies in the valley by consumers. Okay, so as we think about an economic and workforce development strategy, one of the things we want to do is think about addressing this leakage. It's a lot of dollars. And there also, as you can see, health is a growth cluster with several high growth occupations in the valley. When you look at the Employment Development Department and the U.S. Department of Labor, a lot of the fastest growing careers are in the health sector. But you've heard already about some of the challenge that we have, like with the nursing And some of the conversation has actually been, maybe we need to do some incumbent worker training to get people up to the next skill level so that it opens things more up at the lower level. But there's been a lot of discussion across the meetings about the nursing. But this is where also other areas come in, like home health care workers, and sort of how the industry's changing. I'll quickly recap, there are a lot of initiatives that are going on in the cluster and across to support the cluster. And as Avatar and Mr. Schilling and Annalisa and others have mentioned, there's a really increasing public policy focus on healthy lifestyles, access to healthy food, livable communities, community design, infrastructure, and how all these things affect our health outcome. And a lot of partners are working on these kind of issues. So it's an opportunity for the cluster. Just building on some of the major regional initiatives and opportunities, the California Partnership Valley, it has had a health and human services work group. And what we think is that that work group should be reconfigured for the cluster. One of their big priorities was to try to get UC Merced to get medical school there. So obviously they're going to keep working on that, but the direction you can provide us will really be helpful. The workforce boards had a clusters of innovation health project across the valley that was great. Again, they need funding to continue that. There are a lot of innovations that have happened. We've been working with the state workforce board. They have a health policy council, but this is where the partnership can be a voice and an advocate for your work. You're going to hear about the California Community Colleges Committed for Change. In terms of the telehealth and the network, what we need is good broadband for that, as well as people that know how to use technology, consumers, households. There's a digital divide issue, especially around language proficiency. A lot of professionals need to be trained on how to use the broadband and the services, but also it's a really great opportunity in terms of workforce training for health information technology. So there is a regional consortium for broadband. That's also managed by Fresno State, and that's part of a statewide network that's actually funded through the California Public Utilities Commission. So there's some good new initiatives that will help. And then, as you heard on Elisa and others, there's a Building Healthy Communities project funded by the endowment in South Kern. There are 14 projects around the state. There are 3 in the valley. There is 1 in Fresno and Merced. So that's a deep investment, and that's a catalyst project, again, for community transformation. You're going to hear Cheryl Scott talk about this new project that they have at the EDC. The Community Action Agency is looking at the planning for a Kern Food Policy Council, which is a great way to pull a lot of these strands together. UC Merced has a new Health Sciences Research Institute, so again, that's looking at innovation, research, trying to commercialize new ideas and create new businesses in the valley. As I mentioned, the California Workforce Investment Board has a workforce council. They've come to some of our meetings. They're very interested. These are follow-up opportunities. And then several counties have sector initiatives, sector pathway projects where they're collaborating from high school all the way through across the systems to really look at some of the specific training areas. You know, one of the big challenges with workforce is you identify a need, you get the curriculum together, you get the program in place, you get the pipeline going, and after a while you fill the gap. And then you're oversupplied, but you have gaps in other areas. So you have always this challenge of information, and that's why the partnerships are really important, because there are gaps. There's oversupply and undersupply, for sure. So just to, you know, you heard about some of the other drivers that are going to affect the cluster, especially, you know, the impacts of Affordable Care Act. Whatever happens, there's still growing need. We have a lot of population and demographic changes going on, rising healthcare costs. There's the move to more patient-centered care, culturally appropriate healthcare services, information technology. So there's a lot of things in the context that we think about planning for the cluster. So what we want to do today is really talk about the big gaps and issues that we can work on together, and meeting the employer needs especially, and identifying those things that really you can recommend to the partnership that they can do in their action plan to help and support you. And then we'll also talk about some things that you want to work on locally here. But as you can see, there's so many things going on, and I didn't capture everything. You heard John talk about a lot of other things going on in colleges, Mary's work, Steve, you know, there's so much going on. How do we connect and how do we leverage? And one of the things that came up, we've had 2 other meetings in Fresno and Modesto, is how do we keep the dialogue going? And this is something that the partnership is willing to help do. There are 2 board members who are pretty big leaders in the healthcare cluster, and they're personally committed to working with you to move this along. So it's not, you know, constant meetings. It's a way to have a work plan and to keep it going on the critical times to talk. So after we hear the rest of the presentations that we talk, before we leave toward the end of the day, we have a worksheet we'll pass out. We'd really like you to think about, after you've heard everything, and you know from your own work, these are the 5 areas that the action plan is focused on. So we'd like you to just tell us, you know, sort of what the 1 or 2 big ideas are and what the actions are that you would like to see. And you don't have to address all areas, just wherever you think is where you want to put your focus. So that's what we hope to come out with today. And we're going to connect from the 3 regions. This is the best cluster for us. We haven't been able to do all the clusters across the valley, but this is one, and we're, again, very grateful to be here. I'm not going to go through all this. You'll have it for your worksheets, but I tried to just summarize some of the highlights from the other 2 meetings. And you've already mentioned a lot of them, like standardizing the curriculum across the campuses in the valley, the transferability of credits across the systems, dealing with residencies, in public and private employer partnerships, training gaps, career pathways. The pipeline is a big issue. Best practices, models for allied health professionals, tapping into those. You know, what are we missing in our healthcare workforce that is stopping us from getting some of these employers that want to be in the valley or expand? And then there's some other big issues like the financing and reimbursement. Some of those are really not our work, you know, they're going to happen in a different place. So we think about the wedge of what the partnership can help with. But again, you know, access came up as a big issue in rural areas, and so the partnership works on valley-wide transportation issues, so it's good to elevate those things. Any kind of regulatory things have been raised. We need a home for the cluster to be able to connect, so think about, you know, again, that support that Fresno State and other partners can provide. And, you know, some of the business linkages in other areas. So now we're going to hear about some other initiatives, a couple local, and then also Nancy Huff. I'm so delighted she can join us. She's got a tremendous background in nursing when she was at Fresno City College, and she came back to this area, back to this project because she was retired, and she's got a passion for this work. And I also want to thank Stephanie for coming down, and Robert Pimentel he's working on the project too. So Nancy is going to talk about the C6 project, which John referenced. And this is really a tremendous opportunity. Again, it's kind of a game changer project. And Nancy's going to give us an overview of the project. So one of the big areas is focusing on health. So thank you for coming with us, Nancy.
Good morning. You notice this Dr. Carol Goldsmith is the person who's supposed to do the presentation, and she sent her slides. But I'm focusing on the healthcare portion, the healthcare sector, which I have a team lead for that. So, as you know, there's C6. How many of you have heard of C6 grant before this morning? Okay. Oh, good. Okay. C6 is Central Valley Community Colleges Committed to Change. 6 Cs is what that is. And it is a consortium of 11 colleges initially. And then little changes came afterwards. But what it is we are going to change the way, or redesign the delivery of education, okay? In order to meet the needs of industry, okay? And not wait for 2 years of finding out what the statistics say, but even what at the moment, like in situations like this, when we're able to talk with our industry partners. So that, and also making sure that the curriculum that we redesign are going to meet not only the needs of industry, but also allow the participants to get out there in the workforce faster. How are we going to do that? So those are the things I'm going to share with you, but also other things that you may not know. The colleges that are involved in this particular project are from the south, north to the south, or south to the north. And from Kern, we have Saracosa, Bakersfield, and Porterville. We also have West Hills College Lemoore, West Hills College Coalinga. We have Crescent City College, Weebly College, Merced, San Joaquin Delta, and TAP. Did I miss some? I think I got everyone. So that's what the participating colleges are. Not all colleges are participating in the healthcare sector. There are three sectors that the project is working on: healthcare, ag manufacturing, and alternative energy. Those are the three sectors. And today I will share with you where we are at in healthcare. Actually, these are slides that Dr. Goldsmith has prepared for her presentation. And if you need copies of it, I guess they will be able to send them to you as well. But why are we so lucky to have this grant from the Department of Labor, Department of Education? It's because we're the only California consortium was granted, and she forgot to put million, nearly $20 million. It's actually, to be exact, is $19,993,000 and some cents is how much it is. It's nearly $20 million. And it's focused on employer need. And like I said earlier, ag manufacturing, healthcare, and alternative energy. So what are we going to do? We're going to do change, and should put it here doing the same thing and expecting different results. It's insanity. So who's this gentleman? You all know who he is. Things must be made as simple as possible, but never simpler. There's something to think about. Because if we're going to redesign curriculum, we redesign how we deliver education, we have to think about, wait a minute, are we doing this right for the people that are going there and the people who will be using whatever it is that we are going to produce? So how are we going to do this? We're going to do a regional approach. We're going to align curriculum. But the very important thing that we're really looking at is looking at using, as we're redesigning curriculum, using open source or low-cost textbook development. In healthcare, the cost of textbooks is just enormous. Nursing alone. So we're looking at, as we redesign our curriculum, we're looking at what is out there that we can use as an open source, and what can we create ourselves, and or how can we reduce the cost of the students by using texts that are free that you can access online, and there are many. So we're going to do that. We're also going to have, and I think that Mr. Shirley had said earlier about, we want people who live in necessity, we know have those basic needs that they need, the basic skills that are needed in doing that. We will have a common assessment tool that we're going to use for all participants, whether it's healthcare, ag manufacturing, whatever, so we'll know exactly what are their basic skills needs, and or what are their strengths. Do they really belong where they need to go? So we will have that. We will also share best practices. This is where you see that the colleges who are working together in a specific program share their best practices. It's no longer true where we say, well, no, Bakersfield College is doing this program and we do it very well and we have very good pass rate. I'm not going to share that with anyone else. It's not like that. People share what is best, share their curriculum in order so that we can align it so the students, if they don't finish at Bakersfield, they can go to Crescent City and they don't have to repeat anything. That's what we're trying to do with this project. And of course, achieving common goals. And that is what we see. All the participant colleges and people that are working here, faculty members, administrators, are all looking at the same common goals. This is the open source, the free textbooks and all that I was telling you about earlier. And you all know that that's what the government wants to happen, right? The textbooks, and make sure that open sources. We went to a meeting, it was brought up in Washington, D.C., and then we went again to another meeting about open source textbooks, and it's amazing how MIT, Carnegie Mellon universities, the state board in Washington, Washington State, they're using a lot of the open sources. The C6 project, when we developed it, we're utilizing the for sound educational principle, contextual learning, leading adults to basic skills, relevant manner, employer and student engagement, new dialogue of possibilities, which happens within the members of the consortium that are within the project and in gatherings like this one. And of course, research that shows all people learn best at not all people learn best at Strat. What is it that we as C6 are going to do in order to achieve what we say we're going to do? We all look at what we call a single structure strategy, and every single thing, every program that we're redesigning must meet this criteria or these principles. We decided integrated programs. We enact cohort enrollment. Some of us who've been in healthcare, we know that most of our most of our students are in cohorts, and they move in cohorts. But think even in the other programs that are not going that way. Think about ag manufacturing. They can just go open enrollment, pick and choose whatever courses they want to take, and they may not complete. So that will be there for all of the particular sectors that are being covered. Implement block scheduling, so students know from the beginning, when they start the program, when they'll end and what their schedule will be. Compressing classroom instruction. That doesn't mean compress and sacrifice quality or decrease units and all that. No, that's not what it is. Because as we all know in healthcare, we have specific number of units, we have accreditation standards that we need to meet and all that. So we do that, but how we look at it and change the delivery of the curriculum so that the students won't have to wait months to complete the whole program or years to complete the whole program, and see how we can work it out. So we change that. And just think about doing that all different colleges are working together to do that. So it's really wonderful. Embedded remediation. Even though in most healthcare programs that we have, we may have what we call prerequisite courses in English and math, but we find as they get into the program, they can't seem to apply the knowledge that they've learned in those courses. So in here, we have basic skills faculty who are working with the program faculty in embedding remediation of basic skills or even content of the course with the use of former students if necessary, or the faculty who are going to do that, but embedded within the courses within the program. Another strategy is increasing transparency and accountability in labor market relevance. We have to make sure that, yeah, we do all these things, people will can see it. We have a website that people can look at and see how things are going. But the accountability portion, that we don't just keep graduating them, or they're finishing, but they don't get jobs, okay? So increase in employment is one of the biggest things. Transformative technology. We use technology in our delivery. We're utilizing the open sources and online resources and innovative student support services. We need that in order for us to say, okay, we're compressing the number of days that you may be there, but the students will need help. One of the things I wanted to bring up in the accountability, is that I wanted to say that, and we are tracking our students. And some of you are used to that. We all have grants that we have to track when they started, when they ended, and did they get jobs. We do that. One of the things that we have to look at, and I know someone alluded to that, is sometimes we don't, in one of our meetings, we don't really need all, in this particular healthcare needs or job, to have somebody with a bachelor's degree, a baccalaureate degree. Because we really need an entry-level person that will go and move on. So we also, not just in healthcare, but also in the other sector, we also do what we call certificate or credential stacking when you can start low, but then whatever you took care of, when we're developing our curriculum, this is what we want to look at and be very sensitive at that. They complete this portion, they can do a certain job, they will get a certificate that they completed that. And then they can use that as they move on to a higher level, just like some of you may be aware of the LVN to RN articulation, CNA to LVN articulation. We can do the same thing in other areas. We have for medical assistant. Is there something before that that they will need, that if you give them a certificate, they can be given credit for that? So those are the things that we need to look at, and we need to be sensitive to, and we're looking at C6. And just a sidebar here, in industry, I wish that in industry, they will hire and will say, I will hire you if you have a certificate in this. I will hire you if I know you did a work keys and your level of knowledge or aptitude in this area is this much. If industry will do that, that would be really good. And that's why we're having all this dialogue. So Wes Hills is the overall coordinator for the redesign teams. We have Ridley is the people involved in agriculture, and Crescent City College, like we said earlier, is the lead for healthcare. Coalinga, West is Coalinga for alternative energy, and Bakersfield College is leading the basic skills embedded. So all of the colleges are working together. This is the red team leads for health, David Clark from Ridley's agriculture, and Dr. Rebecca Flores for basic skills, and Robert Pimentel, who is back there, is the technical and really assistant to this whole program, and Courtney Collation is from the Clean Energy Organization. The schools, the colleges and the programs that they are going to be working with is, if you notice the asterisk, Cerro Coast Health, COS is, oh, I forgot COS when I was talking about all the colleges, because COS is doing energy and health as well. This is physical therapy aid, and I'm very excited about that one. Taft was originally a member for energy, but because the programs that they wanted to work with, to participate in the project, had to be cut because of the state budget cuts, so they had to withdraw from that. In the meantime, Modesto Junior College, who's not part of the grant, is not getting any funding for it, are very much interested in working with us in the Psych Tech program. The Psych Tech, if you notice this, for the Psych Tech, there are the Porterville, Delta, and West Hills are the main areas for the Psych Tech programs. They're working so closely so that their curriculum is aligned and always similar, so that the students graduating from one has the same knowledge from over here. One of the things that I also want to share about Psych Tech is, you know, those in the prison, when we used to have nurses or LVNs who then are also trained as, I keep forgetting, security or whatever, I keep forgetting.
Correctional.
Correct. I keep forgetting. I don't know why. Correctional officer training in Sacramento, they're able to do that, and then they get a higher pay. Well, now you're either a correctional officer or you are in health. So what so they find though that if they're doing that, they find that the nurses going there, they lack something. They lack because they didn't have the training with the correctional officer, the setting of boundaries, how you communicate with the inmate, is that what they call inmate, and all that. So that's all included in the Psych Tech program. They added at the end, so that and we knew that because we were talking with the industry, and so that's part of the curriculum. That's just an example. The LVN to RN. We have here Stephanie Robinson, who's part of the big movement, but the transferability, the AB 1295, which is the transferability of credits from associate degree into the baccalaureate programs. We're very sensitive to that, so we know that when our students graduate from the RN program, that, you know, the courses that are transferable, that is not going to, that the students will not have to repeat any of those. If you look in here, the total numbers, we have to have 3,069 students who are going to be part of this project, and then we have to make sure that those 3,069 students are employed after they complete the project. So it's a big challenge for us, but we will work hard because we're going to support the students as well. So targeted healthcare, this is RN, VN, psych tech, paramedics. Paramedics are also working together. There's 3 colleges working together, having the same offering. Rad Tech, physical therapy aides, multi-skilled technician, biomedical and technologist, medical assistant. I know that's what she didn't put in here. CNA to medical assistant. And what have we done since we were awarded? This is almost the end of our first year of the grant. We have gone to training, Department of Labor training at Washington, D.C., involving the California Partnership. We have meetings after meetings. Red teams do the redesign of education delivery. That's what that means, meetings every week. There's something going on. The healthcare curriculum review, manufacturing review, revisions, teams working in open source scenarios, making sure that they are, when we develop something, it'll be open for everyone to use, redesign, reuse, recreate for whatever new purpose. Data reporting, working with the regional WIBs, and then selection of the collaboration tools. What are the outcomes that we need to get? Aligning resources with C6 project, better use of technology to support students. There's a whole bunch of technology available to them. We want to make sure that is used to support the students. We all know that we have things that we say, oh, okay, there's an online, as faculty members, there are online resources for you to check, and here's your assignment to do it. Many times our students may not be able to do that. Many times they say, I have a family to support, I have to work, I have to go to school, so I just can deal with whatever you give me in school. They may not be able to do the extra assignments that you tell them to do. So when we embed remediation, it's done within the program, within the time that they are going to be in the classroom as well. So that's captured. Common centralized diagnostic assessments, develop alternative basic skills curriculum. Some of our, in the CTE courses, the basic skills are using the new programs as we work with them, that what they call reading, where they can develop basic skills. Instead of having to take 3 or 4 developmental courses, they can develop a course that will prepare them for that particular course that they want to have. Like for stats, okay, they will develop a course that that will prepare them for the stats, and instead of having to take 3 or 4 developmental courses to get there. Prescriptive student approach. We have the required student assessments, students to participate and support resources, address basic skills deficiency while they're in the program itself, and provide students with full-time block schedules. So improve instructional delivery plus completion equals employment. We hope that with those strategies that we're doing, the students that we're entering will be completing, and then we'll have employment. Any questions so far? We just kind of went this fast, so I'm very, it's almost time. So we said that we continue to work on the issues. There are barriers there. We either go over it, just go under it, or just go crash through it. And those are the things that we do. And we're all committed. We're all passionate about this particular project, and we are bound and determined to do what we need to do in order to get to where we need to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
much, Nancy. And I just want to thank Nancy and Stephanie again for coming down, and Robert, but also just really to note that this is not business as usual. What Nancy's talking about is changing the way things are done. And really, I think, proving and highlighting the fact that the Valley is the center where innovation happens. And this is a very creative, partnership-driven project with local partners here. So I just want to, mention that also Carol Goldsmith is on the partnership board, so she's a voice for carrying this forward. And we're really trying to change the way we do things and help our communities, businesses, and students have better outcomes. So thank you very much. And now we're just going to, Cheryl Scott, who's the Vice President of Kern EDC, she's going to give us a little overview of her project. We'll talk to Lucas, and then we'll talk amongst ourselves. So, Cheryl, over your
Good morning, everybody. I'm with the Economic Development Corporation, and I know a lot of you know what we do at EDCs, but I also know some of you probably are not really familiar with what we do. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background first, so you can understand why we're here. Most counties have an Economic Development Corporation, and we are funded by private investors, private businesses, and also by public investors like cities and the county of Kern. And our role is to recruit new businesses to Kern County and to work to retain businesses in Kern County and try to keep them here and not moving to another state or outside of the area, and to help them grow and thrive. Maybe identify barriers that they might be having in expansions, or just being a healthy organization. What can we do to help? Sometimes it means working closely with those public side investors to, or partners that we have, to try to facilitate moving permitting along, or something along those lines to help private business create jobs. So we focus on 5 different industries in Kern County, and they were identified because they're industries that make sense for Kern County. They're industries that would be helpful for the area, or just would have a strong opportunity for success in Kern County. So we've got, and they're the naturals: energy, value-added agriculture, warehousing and logistics, and that's what you see in Shafter and Cajon Ranch. Commercial project down there with IKEA, famous footwear in those projects, aerospace and defense in Eastern Kern, and of course healthcare. So working in a regional effort like this is not new for us at all. We actually participate with a Central California EDC. We collaborate with the other counties in the Valley, and we go out and market the Valley to businesses that are located in other areas of the country but are looking perhaps to expand, actually maybe in California. There are actually some that are considering California, and it's got to be just the right fit, and we know that, and these industries we're talking about make sense. So we'll team up in a lot of cases with the other counties, go out and market the Valley, and then when we can get some interest in the Valley, then we fight tooth and nail with the other counties to try to get them to land the deal here in Kern County, not Fresno County or Tulare or someplace else. Healthcare is an area that we've kind of had some stops and starts trying to work on in the past few years. We had not up until now really landed on a project with partners that was really critical, that we could really get our footing. But after a lunch with Robin Manger and Scott over at Eureka's, we were talking about what are some of the issues in healthcare, and recruiting and retaining employees, like Steve Schilling mentioned, seemed to be really the underlying theme. And it's something we hear from all healthcare providers. We've heard it here today. And so we thought, well, what if we identified a high school that we could work with and focus on growing our own skilled professional workforce in the way of healthcare? Well, East Bakersfield High School, as Freddie knows, has an outstanding health careers academy. Freddie went through the program, he was just telling me earlier. And they've been around for about 18 years. I think it's the oldest academy in the state. So, but as long as they've been around, and as great as it is, and they have great internship opportunities at hospitals in different locations, they didn't have a mentoring program in place. So our thoughts were, Robin and myself and a few other people and folks at East Bakersfield High School, our thoughts were, if we could pair up medical professionals in Kern County with these kids and encourage more people to go into healthcare, build a bond that will remain through their high school years, because they'll start with these students as sophomores and go through their entire high school year as their mentor. So it is a commitment. Then we'd like to see that bond continue when the students either go away to school, continue college here, maybe when they come back in the summertime, they'll have internship opportunities, or, and then maybe as it continues, maybe there will be a commitment for hiring. And maybe that job future, somebody back there, oh, it was Avatar, was saying that she came back because she had a great job opportunity. If you know you have a job opportunity, if you come back home, if your family wasn't enough to do it and your friends weren't enough to do it, maybe knowing that you're going to be able to make some good money will be enough to do it. So that's our goal, is to connect healthcare professionals with high schoolers. Right now, East Bakersfield High School, hopefully we'll expand. I don't see why we can't, because we had our first meeting less than a month ago, and the committee went out and started talking to people at their jobs. We already have at least 20 people. We were looking for 30. So we're thinking maybe now we'll actually start with sophomores and juniors, eventually go to other high schools. And the committee will not only be working, the Alliance of Medical Professionals will not only be working on mentoring, though. It's an opportunity for all of us to get together, kind of like this, smaller group though, but similar variety of people, to identify what are the issues happening in Kern County and what can we do as a team to try to address them. So if any of you, this is a friendly audience here, so that's great. If you guys are just the people we need to talk to, if you'd like to be on the committee, or if you would like to be a mentor, or if you, we have flyers somewhere. I don't know if you have them. You set them out by the sign-in sheet.
Okay, they're outside.
They're outside? Okay, great. Take some of the flyers and post them, hand them out to people at work who you think might be good mentors. We're getting, people really want to touch the lives of these high schoolers, and if we can grow our own professionals, keep them in Kern County, and make an impact on their lives. And some of these kids at East Bakersfield High School, they've got a rough road ahead of them, and if we can help them out then and help the industry at the same time, it's awesome.
Cheryl, I just also wanted to mention that these mentorships are not just in the area of clinical. They're laboratory, they're maintenance sometimes, they're just different areas of interest, food service.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I looked at Corey, who's our grants coordinator, and that reminds me, if any of you have grants you think might be good for us to partner on, if you come across something related to this type of project, we would love to talk to you about it, maybe partner with you on it. We applied for an OSHPOD grant a while back, and that didn't come through, but we found out, Cindy Collier from Bakersfield College said, gosh, if we had paired up on it, maybe it probably would have happened. So next time for sure, but if you guys have any ideas, we're looking for money, because eventually, even though the EDC is housing this right now, the goal is to move it over to, well, it's officially under our foundation, which is a 501c3, which would have a lot of grant opportunities, and also would be a tax deductible charity for businesses who would like to kick in to get the program going.
That's fantastic. And Cheryl, what you're mentioning about the partnership, I know that a lot of the funding sources are rewarding collaborations and partnerships too. So that's what they're looking for. So I think you do make yourself more competitive. But what you've got is the foundation really for a way for people to keep working together.
Yep, this has been around. The logo's brand new. Oh, can I use this? Logo's brand new, isn't that pretty? But I mean, it is very, very early, but it's been so exciting to hear all the medical folks that are excited about being part of it.
Okay, we have Lucas who's going to talk to us from Bakersfield College about a program that they're working on the ground. Lucas, as he mentioned, is the program manager for the Allied Health Department.
So brief, kind of local example of what a large public institution is doing. in the Valley to educate, meet the needs of their local community, and then hopefully I give you guys a couple takeaways for the discussion that Trish and John are going to lead here right after. Challenges, hardships, I think that would be common to Fresno Community College, San Joaquin Valley College. Hopefully I can kind of help get the discussion going. Right off the bat, I wanted to talk about what we do have at Bakersfield College. The phone calls I get are very entertaining. Having impacted allied health programs, especially with 17, 18, 19-year-olds, the rumors are great. So hopefully I can help dispel some of those too. But at Bakersfield College right now, we do registered nursing, vocational nursing, nurse assistant, radiologic technology, emergency medical technician, and paramedic. We do work with some distance education. John alluded to Lake Isabella offering for some of that. Porterville, which is in our district, has our site tech program. And then Bakersfield College also manages the LVN to RN program in the high desert at Saracoso. So we do have a lot to offer. We don't have enough. We're not meeting all the needs of the community. We'll get into that briefly. Right now at Bakersfield College, we have 3,300 students who have declared their major either to be BN, RN, or LVN to RN. I think it's closer to about 4,000 of our 18,000 plus, just because not every 18-year-old has the gumption to fill out the form correctly, or really knows what they want to do. I certainly didn't do the form correctly when I was 18, so I think of the 18,000 or so students, we're responsible for close to 400 to 4,500 of those just in our health career programs. You can see what we're putting out. We're not quite as large as Fresno's community college program, but we are putting out a fair amount of graduates every year. I think meeting the needs for the most part in the programs that we do offer. Right off the bat, registered nursing, our local grads to this point have not had an issue finding a job. Getting hired 2 or 3 years ago, they were getting to name their floor, their job, their schedule. It's not that good anymore. We are kind of facing a perfect storm right now. San Diego and San Francisco especially, not only are there students coming into our area to apply to our program, I'm sure Fresno faces the same challenge. A lot of those areas, they want magnet status. Their hospitals only want to hire bachelor students, or the hospitals there are only hiring students that have a year or two of general med-surg experience. So I love the mission of the community college. We meet the needs of local. However, because of some of the grant money we have accepted, we must take applicants anywhere in California. As long as they have a California address, they're welcome into our program. The RN program is impacted, so we do use kind of a are you eligible lottery system. But a lot of times we are very aware of your retention efforts, you employers, where they are coming here, getting our education, then they're even going to work for you for a year or two before they abandon us and go back to the Bay or down in San Diego. So that is a challenge we face. I know Cindy Ardeen and some of the other people here are always kind of nudging our policymakers. I don't have an answer. I don't know what we should do. Again, I like the spirit of what the community college offers, but especially in the way of RN program, there is a challenge there with keeping local talent, only accepting local talent, growing our own kind of mentality. And certainly the salaries are much higher in the way of mental health. My RNs that go up, work in Ridgecrest or some of the prisons, they're making well over $30 an hour. Vocational nurse, $15 to $17 an hour. I would say this is true for the BCBN program. Clear majority of our students are not wanting to be vocational nurses. They either were not eligible for the RN program because of low grades, low assessment scores, or they think this is a shortcut. They can get an entry-level job. Here locally, we're not hiring our VNs in the traditional RN settings at all. So our VN grads that do go right to work, yes, they're getting a decent wage, but they're going to be working in our schools, prisons, home health, hospice, those kinds of facilities. Their plan is always to come back and become an RN. We worry about the state of our VN field here locally. I think there is a danger of flooding the market with the way we are doing things, with the number of schools that are coming into the area. Certainly there's not enough clinical space for our VN students. We're talking about the C6 grant. We're going to take in 20 additional VNs. Those we're going to encourage all to go to work. I do worry 2 years from now with the number of schools that have come to the area that there's just not enough jobs immediately. Another one of those perfect storm problems we talk about with the RNs and the VNs too is KMC has a need for 40 RNs today. They can't hire 40 brand new baby grads because there aren't enough veterans to train them. These are fully competent healthcare workers, but they need job shadowing. They need that kind of on-the-job training. Where's the mop closet type of stuff. And they don't always get that right away, so they can only hire 5, 6, 7, 8 nurses per floor. So there is kind of a stalemate in the way of having plenty of grads, hiring freezes because of the economy, and then outside people coming to the area. I do believe all of our VNs, all of our RNs at Fresno, at San Joaquin Valley College are going to find jobs this year and next year, but I worry about long-term some of those issues that we're facing. Nurse assistant, entry-level jobs, you guys all know what this is. Basic care provider, $10 to $12 an hour. At BC, we do them 3 times a year, one semester programs. Radiology and technology, my x-ray techs, they don't like to be called that. I'm not in the healthcare profession, so I don't call them that. I learned that. I learned a lot of lessons the hard way where I am. But 2-year program, and we are training in everything, CT, MRI, nuclear medicine. Another big misconception too, the limiting x-ray tech, ultrasound tech, those kinds of small certificate programs. BC doesn't offer any of those. We kind of don't believe in them either. Our license, it is a 24-month license. It's what the hospitals are telling us they want. Career mobility, but also they want kind of that multimodal, I can do it all, rad tech. And so we put out a fair amount of those. Much smaller field, much smaller job offerings, but to this point, our grads are finding jobs. So healthy but small. Emergency medical technician, we usually take 40 to 60 or so of these every semester, 3 times a year, fall, spring, summer. Entry-level work, all of your California Highway Patrol have to be an EMT now. Many firefighters from down south have to be EMTs. A lot of our law enforcement have to be EMTs. So we get all kinds. We have a very diverse class every semester in the way of EMTs. Paramedic is the only program that I have that I get to oversee that is contract education. It is just what it sounds like. There's no tuition, there's no units given. We do provide the space and the educators, but it is a private contract, meaning no financial aid. I need $5,000 up front, and then we're going to run you through a program. For political reasons that are older than I am, we have never offered this in the way of traditional college education. 3 months of kind of classroom lecture. We do provide ambulance ride-alongs, hospital internships, and then they have to get so many hours out in the community, which we facilitate as well. Certainly we meet the needs of Delano, Lake Isabella, our big ambulance companies here in town. We get a lot of students who are coming from down south. There are not enough spots in LA for paramedic training, and so they are coming to Bakersfield. Again, they do pay their cash, and then they go right back to LA. So there are definite needs for EMT to paramedic bridge programs, and even an expansion of a paramedic program here locally. General challenges, I think we all know what these are. We've touched on a little bit. Central Valley is going to need 12,000 additional allied health employees in the next 2 years. I always tell I do some of the outreach and high school stuff too for our department. So I tell the students, blame your parents. They're leaving the workforce, so some of our veterans are going to be gone. Some of our trainers are leaving. They're also, in this room, I don't want to use the word burden, but they are going to need the healthcare system. And so there's going to be a huge demand for our new graduates. And we are very aware of those things. A couple things, hopefully we have time to touch on some of these, but in the education side, we have really limited ourselves in the way of clinical space. One of my jobs is to continually talk to the adult school and Cal State and our hospital and clinica partners, maximizing space. We're talking weekends, evening rotations, things like that. There just isn't enough space with all of the additional VN programs from down south coming, additional training places, we just don't have them. And so we're always looking for creative ways to use simulation equipment. How can we fake it but still be safe and as safe and ready to work on that first day as possible. Master's prepared educators, I don't think we've felt this yet locally. Cal State's gone, right? So I have to talk bad about them now. They suspended, kind of put on hold their master's degree program. And locally in the workforce, I don't think it has had an impact yet. In the next 2 years, it's really going to hurt the education side. We want to hire masters and doctoral prepared instructors. It's very difficult to recruit. Our teachers don't make as much as nurses. So why would you leave a job near UCLA to come teach at a community college for half the salary? It's hard to recruit good quality educators, And without kind of growing our own nurse practitioners, physicians assistants, most of my students go up to Stanford, and then some we see back and some we don't. Number one, it's going to be hard to hire educators without a master's program in town. John's not here either, so I can give away secret info. 18 months ago, we talked to Point Loma, Nazarene. They talked about bringing some kind of distance ed. They do a nice job. The phone has gone cold. They know there's a need here. And sometimes the smaller private schools can move faster than the big monster public institutions. So they recognize the need in the valley, but as far as I know, there's no plans for an immediate master's program for 100 miles. So there's a need there, and in 2 years beyond, it's going to really hurt us. Of course, the expense. John alluded to it. Our programs are very, very expensive. We do rely heavily on, well, John's here now, so I guess I'm talking about the secret stuff. But the expense of our equipment, we've got some really neat simulation stuff. And again, I'm not a medical background person, so when I see a mannequin that can squeeze a hand and blink and yell at you and loses fluid, I'm very impressed. Our students are very impressed. These dummies, $80,000 to $100,000 each, and through creative grant work and you know, stuff that Cheryl talked about, we've been able to purchase some of those. We do have really nice equipment, but again, kind of my projection that 2 years out, Mark, some of that money's going away, and everybody's feeling the pinch. And where I am, we always are a little behind kind of what the economy's doing. So the trickle down, it's scary for me in the next 2 years. We do need some creative things. Our administration recognizes the importance of the expensive programs we offer. Sometimes it's hard to justify it on paper, but I really believe that we have a commitment from our administration meeting those needs. I too am looking for money everywhere I can find it. Radiology is very expensive. The hospitals have told us we need people that are trained in every one of those radiation therapy facets, every kind of MRIs and CT scans. We need them to be able to float from floor to floor. We can't have these very narrow certificates. We need the global radiologist. So some things to think about. And we've already talked a little bit about the academic preparedness, but here in the Valley, a lot of our students are 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 levels below the reading and English, and we are working very hard to implement critical thinking, leadership, communication. One of my big tasks this year, we're going to talk a lot about social media and where it's appropriate and where it's not. We have not taken anything out of our curriculum, we just keep putting stuff into it. So finding a way to creatively manage all of that and pay for all of that, it is a challenge. Let alone when you're talking about not being able to read at an English level that, I don't know medical terminology, but if I can't read the basic instructions, my human anatomy homework is going to be very difficult. So those are all the things we're kind of facing. Some other things to talk about if we have time here. The community needs, and this is just my personal qualitative anecdotal research, but the hospitals say we don't have enough local grown pharmacists, obviously, clinical lab specialists, bachelor's prepared lab specialists. I think we're doing a good job with radiologists, RNs, nurse assistants at the technical college level. Health information technologists, we've talked about it, maybe some more secret information, but nothing in the way of curriculum being offered yet. We do have plans, and we've looked at some things for the HIT programs. We're doing as much as we can in the way of our RN training to increase technology and computer use so that they're ready for electronic medical recording and stuff like that, but it is growing more difficult with the way the budget is. And then lastly, lab techs. There's not a, I don't think, step on toe. I don't think there's a very strong lab tech program here yet. We do some things very well at some of our smaller schools in town, but just a generic certificate lab tech program, we just don't have one yet. So, what else are we doing? Of course, I do the career days, job fairs, high school events, open house, info nights to dispel some of those rumors. We do partner with the high schools, RN Explorers, and their big mission, promoting local grown healthcare providers. So we get it. Sometimes we're a little slow and we're too big for our own good, but we know the challenges we're facing, and we are glad to be working with all of you.